Today, continuing my discussion about trauma. So in this particular little short, I want to discuss the problem around therapies for trauma. I have experienced multiple traumas in my life, and that's very painful. And from a very young age, in my little talk, What Does This Crazy Lady Do? There's a discussion about an interaction with my mother-in-law when she was first diagnosed with cancer. And I had been studying the writings of Louise Hay, and I began to understand that the way we think affects the way our body feels, and that there's a connection between our emotional energy and what's going on in our bodies. And I had mentioned that to my mother-in-law, that I thought there was an emotional connection when people develop cancers. And she wanted to know how you could heal that, and I didn't have that answer, but I wanted to know it. And so that was a journey that started for me literally the year my son was born. And so however old he is this year, I had to do the math and figure that out, is how long I have been delving into the understanding of healing. And I have studied Chinese medicine. I have done every kind of therapy that you can imagine. I have read thousands of books. I have listened to thousands of things. I don't do any of that anymore. People ask me all the time, are you listening to this person? They're an expert, this, that, and the other thing. I don't, because I want to keep my voice, what I'm hearing in my mind, I want it to be very clearly come from the source of all knowledge, which is the divine. And through my Qigong practice and my practice of Qin and Song and the Taoist shamanistic training that I do, I want to only hear that voice. So I'm not listening to whatever other people are saying. I want my message to be authentic. And so when we're talking about trauma therapies, I have experienced trauma therapies a lot like breath. I've done breath work type of therapies where you're supposed to be getting in touch with it and releasing all this energy. I don't advise that. That's a whole other talk. I'll talk about that more later. That's cathartic. It may give you a rush. It may give you a good feeling. But if you study people who do breath work as a quote unquote trauma release therapy, and you watch their progress over a year, 5 years, 10 years, most of them their trauma has not been relieved. You cannot force the release of trauma energy. So when we talk about trauma, I refer everybody to a very powerful book by Peter Levine called Waking the Tiger. Peter Levine and Dr. Bessel van der Kolk are probably as far as I'm concerned, the two foremost experts in the field of trauma. And they have discovered that trauma is, the releasing of trauma is a natural healing process. And you cannot force it. That's the bottom line. So even well-meaning therapists who might practice somatic experiences, which is Peter Levine's method of creating an environment which allows for trauma to unwind, will sometimes be more proactive than is necessary. So I have a story about a client who came to see me, and she was seeing somebody who was doing the rapid eye movement therapy. And this woman had experienced something extremely traumatic. And the therapist, every week that she came, wanted her to revisit the trauma in order to get to the shock point so that she could release and heal from it. And all it did is make her break out in shingles. She got so stressed out over it. And so I said, stop doing that. It's not necessary to poke at the wound. What is important is to be able to create an environment in which the body can naturally arrive at the point of being able to release trauma. So that includes making for oneself a safe environment. Getting away from the toxic person in your life. That may mean getting a divorce. That may mean breaking up with somebody. That may mean changing jobs. If you have trauma that you're still suffering from, and there's something in your life that's continually keeping that trauma active, you get away from that person in order to be able to completely heal. You also need to support the physical body. So people who have experienced trauma are often abusing food or drugs or whatever. So you have to learn how to move away from medicating. That's a challenge. It doesn't happen overnight. You need supportive therapies that help you get into your body. People who are traumatized are not living in their body. They are oftentimes people who are really traumatized, whose nervous systems are completely shot, are often actually feel like they're out of their body. If you walk around and you feel like you're floating above yourself, that's a symptom of persistent ongoing trauma that is not resolved. People oftentimes will feel beside themselves, they'll be hysterical, they emotionally can't feel like they can ever stabilize. They're not able to just be with what is. They can't sit still, they don't have a difficult time meditating or following through with doing anything consistently. These are all symptoms that there's an underlying traumatic issue at play here. So we support the physical body by eating a better diet. We try to move away from addictions. If we're having a struggle with that, then we focus on what can I do to begin to shift my energy away from addiction. That's why I have all these different modalities, helping people to get back in their body. When we're able to be in our body and present with our body, then we can feel. We cannot heal something until we can feel what the energy of it is. This is included in my blog on my website, Demystifying Healing. It's also a page on my website for new clients, Understanding the Healing Process. So first we must be able to quiet the mind, get into the body, and be able to feel. So sitting and being with what you feel. If you can do nothing else, if you can't afford any kind of therapy, which you don't need to have in order to heal trauma, you can just practice sitting and being with what you feel. Connect with your breath, go into the interior space of your body and be with what you feel in there. And if what you feel is anger or rage or sadness or whatever it is, just be with it and notice it. This is you connecting with the inner self, connecting with your tissue, saying, I'm here, I'm listening, I'm trusting that my body can take me through this process and I can release the trauma that's within me. Another really great simple practice to do to help resolve trauma is walking. My sister-in-law, who is a very independent individual and had suffered a really serious loss of a loved one, reported to me that the way that she worked through the grief, and grief is one of the most traumatic things, it takes a long time to deal with because it's a visitor that moves in and it isn't gone until it's gone. It's not done with you until it's done. She resolved that trauma by walking every day. She would take anywhere from a 3 to a 5 mile walk every day, out in the evening, watching the sunset, out with her dog, and then she would go back home. And that's all she ever did. And gradually over time, she had an unwinding of her trauma in crying or shaking or whatever it was, the visceral movement of the body to move the trauma out. So my big thing is stay away from therapies that are poking too much at the trauma. These people are well-meaning. I'm not trying to diss anybody, and I'm not saying that they can't be supportive, but when it's constantly stirring up the trauma and you're not being able to get in the visceral body so that the trauma can unwind all on its own when you're safe and you feel ready, you won't even know when that time is because it happens when it happens. Okay, more about this later. Vanessa Goldine talking about trauma, what it is, how to heal it, how to allow it to heal. You cannot actually put your hands on it and say, I'm going to make this better. We can do that with a broken leg, but we cannot do that with a broken heart or a heart that's been traumatized. Thanks for tuning in. Vanessa Goldine with Bridge to Health Wellness and the Awaken and Evolve Learning Center here in Scottsdale. I also work remotely with clients who live in any place in the world. Thank you very much.